Hi guys, my name is Emil Mamari. I'm the CFO of Steadyware Incorporated, and I'm here to speak to you guys about our first product, the Steady Glove. The inspiration behind this device came a couple of years ago after I graduated from university. Mark, our CEO, and I were looking for jobs, and our grandmothers got diagnosed with essential tremor at similar periods of time. So at the time, we started looking for solutions for them and came across a couple of different solutions, drugs, a couple of weighted gloves, and of course surgeries. But we didn't find anything that kind of took new age technology and combined it with more robust technologies to make a practical everyday solution. So we decided to dabble into this market ourselves. And that's when we came across a program called the Techno program and the Impact Center at University of Toronto. We decided to apply and started the program in August of 2015. Fast forward 2.5 years later, we are not too far off the market and on the verge of securing a couple of pilots to test this device. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it. And if you have any questions, feel free to just raise your hand, or we can just keep them till the end and I'll have some time for that later on. Thank you very much. So the Steady Glove is our first product. It's a glove. It weighs around, not too heavy, just under a pound. And it's a battery-free solution. The idea came from the combination of vibration damping and nanotechnology. So Mark is a structural engineer, and he took the time to develop technology and combine it with the nanotechnology, which is basically what we did is we put a rotational damper on top of the wrist over here, and we combined it with a shear thickening fluid, allowing the device to kind of have a complete voluntary motion, allowing for all angles of motion while impeding involuntary motion. So I'll tell you more about that as we go. As you guys know, it's a fairly large market. It's in North America alone, it's just over 10 million people. And we'll talk about the problem before I show you guys the Steady Glove. So living with tremors can be quite debilitating. As you might know, essential tremor is the most common type of movement disorder. We also tackle Parkinson's disease with our forearm tremor stabilization. And what we've noticed is that the three main things that we'd like to tackle with this device are eating, drinking, and writing. We see that those three things kind of impede your day-to-day quality of life and your confidence, and we'd like to focus on those things. So essential tremor and Parkinson's disease cause debilitating hand tremors, rendering simplest daily activities, as I mentioned, such as eating, drinking, and writing, a real debilitating case. So it impacts around 3% of the general population, and it can go up to 7% or even higher when you reach age groups such as 50 plus. What we've noticed is that we have realized that there are multiple different solutions, and some of them being activity-specific solutions. You might have seen the Liftware spoon earlier this year. They did a lot of promotion on that. They were actually acquired by Google. The Liftware spoon is an activity-specific device. It retails for around $200. And with that, it's not as versatile as we'd like it to be, but still a very fairly priced technology. There are other solutions on the market too, such as weighted objects. Weighted objects, if they're customizable, they can go up to $300. If not customizable, they range somewhere between $25 to $100. They cause a strain on the patient's wrist and can be a little bit impeding. Back to activity-specific devices, which only tackle one activity at a time, so they don't really have the ability to, have a whole solution. It's one thing at a time. So if you see the Liftware spoon, you'll notice that it's a spoon. There's also a couple of other alternatives, a fork, and we've heard that there might be a comb coming in the near future. Moving on to drugs. Drugs are typically anticonvulsants, such as primidone or propranolol, and Their prescriptions range from anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 a year, depending on where you live. And what we've noticed is that these anticonvulsants have severe side effects, and they cause depression, and the patients aren't very fond of them. As you know, anticonvulsants were actually invented for epilepsy and weren't really made for tremors. And last but not least, we see that there's the surgery. Surgery such as deep brain stimulation can be very intrusive, expensive, and risky. We have seen successful results, but not everyone is actually compatible with such a solution. So that's when we realized that there's a device gap in the market and decided to pursue this project. So this is what the Steady Glove looks like right now. It's a fairly responsive technology. You'll see here, you'll see over there, there's two mechanisms over there. There's a front end damper, which is a rotational damper. That's where the nanofluid is actually coated inside the ball joint. I will show you guys a video after this, so you'll be able to get a better idea of what it looks like. And then it's actually combined with a secondary damper over there that tackles forearm tremors. Still a battery-free technology on that side too. The secondary damper is a tuned damper. It's basically masses that are counteracting each other, and that allows you to tackle forearm tremors. So with this device, you can tackle flexion extension, radial ulnar, pronation supination, and flexion extension of the forearm. It's a pretty responsive device. It's still passive, but its response time is like 10 milliseconds. It's fairly affordable. We haven't agreed on a price point yet, but we'd like to keep it under $750. It's lightweight, under a pound, as I mentioned, and last but not least, as you mentioned, it's battery-free. To date, we've tested over 15 patients. We've seen very successful results. An example of an architect over here, a Canadian architect that suffers of tremors. He was not able to draw a straight line for around 30 to 35 years. And we had the opportunity to test him outside a medical facility because of a personal relationship. The results were very, very, very motivating. And we've seen positive results in eating and drinking too. And I'd like to tell you guys a little bit more about the challenges that we faced while trying to tackle this device and try and tackle this market and develop this device. So over here, you'll see that there are some knobs on there from a company called BOA. That's not really what we had in mind in the beginning, but you know, trying to cater to multiple different sizes and multiple different tremors, we realized that we have to kind of eliminate the slack, and the best way to do that was to tighten the knobs. So what we did is we teamed up with this company called BOA. You can't see it in this photo, but there's also another knob on the forearm. You'll be able to see that in the video when I show you guys an example of the device in action. What we realized is that there are so many challenges in developing a medical device, and being a small company with limited amount of resources, we had to be very selective with our process of hiring. In the beginning, we had 3 engineers on board. One was an intern, and Mark was still a structural engineer, sorry. And last but not least, we had hired a mechanical engineer. The first mechanical engineer that we hired was not innovative and was very impeding to the whole process. He kind of delayed us for over 4 to 6 months, I would say. And what we realized through that process is hire slowly and fire quickly. We moved on to the next engineer at that point, and that's when we stumbled upon the nanotechnology aspect of it. We kind of in the beginning, we were using gyroscopes. We considered using gyroscopes, but due to 1, weight, 2, safety, and 3, batteries, we decided to sway away from that. You will notice that there are other technologies on the market that have been dabbling with gyroscopes. There's a company in Imperial College called Gyro Glove that has specialized in tackling essential tremor and Parkinson's, and they are focused on using gyroscopes. They have delayed their launch a couple of times. I'm not sure how far they've gotten to the market, but there's definitely a good way to do so. With once we realized that we can use nanotechnology to develop such a technology, we ran towards a couple of research scientists and asked them to kind of elaborate on that. So in the beginning, we were not sure if we wanted to use a shear thinning fluid or a shear thickening fluid, and how is the ball damper going to actually react to that. You know, in the beginning, we didn't have immense amounts of patience to go out and test all day. We had our grandparents and one volunteer. So it was really hard to develop what we got to today with the minimum amount of resources, but I have to say that the Ontario community has been very gracious. We did this all with a bootstrap funding strategy, and we were able to raise just over $400,000 in non-dilutive funding to do so through the Ontario Brain Institute, through AgeWell, and Ontario Centres of Excellence. We then proceeded to compete in a couple of competitions around North America, and we arrived at this technology today. So I'd like to tell you guys about the market opportunity and how we will be tackling this market. Some more challenges that we realized were, okay, so people have tremors, but who is going to pay for this? We realized that there are different channels to the market. So we tackled three. Primarily B2C, which you see over there with the International Essential Tremor Foundation and Michael J. Fox Foundation. We're not associated with them, but what we realized is that through targeted ads, we can kind of cater to that market through B2C. And then we also looked at B2D through medical device distributors. That was a much more promising channel. And last but not least was senior living and home health. So over the past year and a half, we've been nurturing relationships with different senior homes and different home health agencies, because we realize that there's a lot of synergy that can happen between us. We will be performing pilots with senior living facilities. We will be launching primarily there and looking for early adopters. And in combination with assistive technology clinics, we will be working on quality of life and independence claims with them together. Senior living and home health was our latest breakthrough. I'd like to admit that it was only a couple of months ago when we got approached by a major senior living facility that suggested we join their innovators program and pursue a pilot. It was then that somebody from their organization suggested joining the program and elaborating on a pilot in-house. We never thought that was a good idea. Like, we never thought of that option. We were going to individuals and kind of tackling support groups, trying to acquire as much knowledge as we can through the patient. But because we tackled a stakeholder approach later on, we realized that interviewing neurologists, occupational therapists, patients, and caregivers gave us a much better scope of the problem we had at hand. This allowed for a much more synergetic product development cycle, and that's how we're going to be tackling that. Allowed us to enhance our business model. So in terms of market opportunity, we were able to extrapolate on the numbers we have from North America, because, as you guys might know, market research is very limited in this field, especially with essential tremor being benign. It's not really on the top priority list of different market research firms. We reached a number of roughly just under 1 billion, 1/4 billion people worldwide, but the annual growth of the market is identified at 5%, and that's based on deep brain stimulation studies mainly, because that's where the majority of the market research lies today. The total accessible market for a product like ours would be just over $1 billion in North America, and we're striving towards a service obtainable market of $500,000 in the first year, based on our estimate of the price point. What we've kind of stumbled upon is that market research is really, really expensive, and what we didn't have as many resources as we would like to have. We're not a major corporation like Medtronic that can, perform major studies and perform significant research. So what we did is we reached out to our personal networks and tried to interview as many neurologists as we could. And it was then that we kind of had a consensus on what were the priorities in terms of design goals and built on that. That took us around 6 months to complete primary market research, and then we supplemented it with a couple of research papers from the internet, and of course Mars was able to give us some market intel through our channels at the incubator. So this is one of our first tests. This is not the device we have today. It's actually an older prototype. It was just a beta prototype, but we tested it on one of the patients from a Toronto support group, and the results were pretty impactful. I'd like to share them with you over here. So this is a postural tremor, and this test was completed a few months ago. As you can see, once the device is put on the hand and the rotational damper is activated, it's fairly stable. We still notice a little bit of finger tremors there, but every case is different. Not all patients have finger tremors as well as wrist tremors. We know that the solution is not going to be something that satisfies everybody, but with the forearm tremor damper and the wrist tremor damper, we believe that we'll be able to access a significantly larger size of population. So as part of our protocol, which we went back and forth on multiple times with different doctors and different stakeholders of the market, we realized that we would have to perform a little bit more than just a postural tremor test. We went for a spiral test here. You can see the results with and without the glove. So on the left, you have the results without the glove, and on the right, you have the results with the glove. Significant difference. We then wondered, is this a placebo? So we proceeded to test with and without the glove, and didn't tell the patient, but we removed the nanofluid from one of the gloves and tested it as a dummy glove. We were very keen on identifying whether or not this was a placebo, because some of the patients that we spoke to were saying that maybe it's just the weight of the device and not the nanofluid in there. So over here you can tell that in black, that's the path that was drawn with the glove. It's a fairly significant result in comparison to the dummy and the no glove. Do I have a spiral with the dummy glove? I can definitely forward you that offline. Yeah. Mark has been leading the tests, and is more than happy to share that with you in private.
And I mean, just recently, we were working with a neurologist to establish the best way to create a good placebo glove. So just recently, we got that built, and we started incorporating it into our test.
Part of that looks, yeah, you can see that the oscillations are large, but part of it looks like they're not that much. On the right side.
Oh yeah, so this was actually, we superimposed the spirals and sketched out just a part of it. If you look at the entire spiral, it would look more better.
So our timeline. To date, we have multiple prototypes that have been developed. We filed an intellectual property for our first patent and are now filing for our second patent. We've started beta testing in late 2016. We're still beta testing today. And moving on to 2017, we received significant funding and initiated conversations with all channels. Spreading ourselves a little bit too thin, we then decided in 2018 to focus on mainly B2B and B2D for now, mainly because of financial restrictions. In 2017, we identified ourselves as a Class 1 through Health Canada and acquired our medical device establishment license. That gave us a little bit more credibility in the market and gave us a much clearer view of our road to market. This year, we aim to perform our first production run. That will be completed in the next quarter. And we aim to launch our pilot studies later this summer. And last but not least, launch the whole company by the end of the year. So to date, our team consists of Mark, myself, and Leonardo, our champion of an industrial designer, who's been on contract but working with us very closely for the past 2 years and a half. We have a very well-rounded team of advisors. Laurent, for example, is an expert at business development. Elizabeth has been working with us on making sure our brochures and our slide deck actually allow for communication with people that are not in the medical field. Dr. Cynthia Go, who has been our principal investigator for over 2 years now, and Dr. Richard McAloney, who's been a mentor with us and has commercialized multiple different products over the years. So that kind of concludes our presentation today. If I were to identify what lessons I've learned over the past couple of years, I would say, once again, hire slowly, fire quickly. One of the biggest mistakes we made early on was in product development. Identifying the correct engineer really slowed us down and did not really help with identifying our weaknesses. In terms of our future plans for StudyWare, we don't aim to strictly be in the tremor market. We will proceed to kind of use our technology for different stabilization mechanisms, and we hope to be on the market by the end of the year at the latest. I'd like to thank all these organizations that I mentioned on the screen. A lot of them have helped us significantly, especially the Global Affairs Trade Commission Office of Canada. And thank you for your time. I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
Very cool. So have you frozen the design then at this point, or you're still doing beta tests?
We're very close. Literally, my designer just sent me model drawings.
As of now, yes, you design.
I wouldn't say it's quite frozen. I just need to do 2 sample iterations of the manufacturer and do some durability tests on each one, and then we can freeze it in one injection.
The question many questions, but I'll start one. People will join in. What's it like to wear the glove? And do you just do it on one hand? Do you do it on 2 hands? And
it depends on the patient.
I guess the question I have is the comfort of the individual wearing it an impactful part of how often they want to use it? You sort of understand what I mean?
So I think the question you have in mind is, are they going to be wearing it all day?
Yeah, and will they wear it for a week and say, yeah, it actually decreases my tremor, but you know what, it's so uncomfortable to put it on me that I'd rather shake. At a certain point, like the comfort.
What's the trade-off? I completely understand.
It's a trade-off. So,
yeah, so
how do you address that?
We'll definitely be addressing more of that during the pilot. Initially, the patients that we've been testing on have not really been complaining significantly about the glove. We do not suggest wearing it if you have arthritis, because your bones will probably be too weak to withstand the damping force. But if you're wearing it to tackle activities, eating, drinking, writing, and maybe a hobby such as piano or golf, yeah, you probably want to wear it just when you're tackling an activity. I wouldn't suggest wearing it all day, but it is machine washable, so
you can't wash it.
The harness, we have harnesses on the device, and you can just plug off.
Does it wear down after a while?
Yes,
or if it gets wet, or?
It will wear down after a certain period of time. The technology, the dampers won't wear down, but the glove will. It's fairly easy to order a new one through the website once we have our store up. It will. I would assume that with a regular washing, it would be withstanding longer than a year. But the dampers themselves, that will last for a significantly longer period of time. And even once you feel like the fluid is not reacting anymore, you can send it back to us. We can coat it once again and ship it back to you wherever you are.
Just to clarify, the damping fluid or the damper also goes into the washing?
No. So there's a harness on there's a harness on the glove. You eject, and the glove goes into the washing machine.
My other question is from, I have a limited understanding of this, but I understand that it is a pretty fast progressive condition.
Correct.
So I guess at what stage does the tremor start, and at what stage does it continue with reversing till?
From my understanding, it's usually an early onset. So in the beginning, there's the tremors, but as the disease progresses, it gets more intense, then it would probably stop with the tremors and start with neurodegeneration.
Go ahead.
I wonder if you could expand on your decision to go with the Health Canada approval and how developed was the product at the time? Maybe just other experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the device like ours is, if we're looking at the medical device, right, it's a class 1 device, right? So, we have the option of going with Health Canada or going down the wellness route. So, really, it's a marketing decision because at the end of the day, why we go after an endo? Because you are claiming that you're helping with a medical condition. If you don't get a medical device license, you can't do that. So at the end of the day, you have to look at your market, you have to look at what your market cares about. If it's important that you're able to say we help with what is an essential tremor, then you have to go down the medical route. I hope that answers your question.
How far along? Like, what do you need to get that?
Yeah, so we actually went with Ironstone Product Development, so they're our regulatory consultants. Essentially, we contracted them out to get the medical device establishment license for us. We were, honestly, we're in the middle of product development. We figured we'll get it out of the way because it was budgeted for. So, went that route. I think it's better to go with a contractor when it comes to something like this rather than doing it yourself. And have some horror stories about regulatory pathways where individuals, even with the class 1 devices, it takes them a year and a half to write out their application. We got with a consultant, we got our license. So,
Is that just Health Canada, or you do FDA?
So we have Health Canada, we're working on FDA registration.
Yeah, FDA is definitely in the pipeline a little bit later this year. We just started a program with the Canadian Trade Commission. It's called the C2MP program. Basically, it gives us access to the American market through a mentorship program in Chicago, and we've been utilizing their regulatory affairs in Matter, the healthcare incubator that's associated with Rush Medical.
So for this type of products, the person who uses it needs to have some kind of cognition, so that they will know to take it on and take it off, etc. Now I see that you are also targeting like senior homes or like the older generation that may have Parkinson. How would you approach that when somebody's needed to use it but may not be able to handle it themselves?
I mean, that's a great question. We're actually working on the structure of our pilot, and that's one discussion. So it's really a case by case thing. So if an individual resident has neurodegeneration and they want to use the glove, in that case, the caregiver. So, some residents are independent enough to wear the glove themselves and interact with it themselves. Others would need some caregiver.
The reason we went after senior living primarily is because, as you might know, caregiving is it's a very stressful environment because they're fairly understaffed. So, like, for example, in America, the ratio during the day of patients to caregivers is 8-1, and then during the night it can reach up to 15-1. So you can imagine if a caregiver is simply feeding a patient and caring to their hydrating needs, then it would take a significant period of time out of their day, which in return causes financial strains on both the senior living and even the patient at a later stage.
Penetration been in the market.
Excuse me.
The competing products, they've been out there longer. How are they doing, and why are they doing great, and if not, what's holding them back?
So, in terms of competing products, there is The main product right now, I wouldn't even consider a competition. It would be more of either a complement or the activity-specific device is Liftware. They were bought out by Google for an undisclosed amount of money as part of their Google X project. And we have noticed that they've also reduced their price by around 33%, which means that volumes are significantly higher. So I think they're doing fairly well for themselves. One thing we learned from Liftware was the assistive technology clinics. We were able to retain the information that they have access to a significant amount of assistive technology clinics where you can actually go try the device, see if it works for you before ordering it. One, that saves us shipping, handling, and time. Two, saves the patient a lot of money and stress. So that's something we definitely picked up from Liftware and will be applying to our technology too. In terms of other technologies that are also competitive with ours, there are weighted gloves that are customizable, such as the Ready Steady glove, based in America. They retail for, if I remember correctly, somewhere between $300 and $400, and it would involve you and going to their lab and molding a glove specifically for your hands. Weighted gloves can cause strain on the patient's wrist, and if you are fairly older and have feeble bone structure, it's definitely not going to work for you. But I think that can be effective in some cases.
And just to add to Emil's point, if you look at the Tremor industry in general, it's very non-consolidated. There aren't any sort of major players. It's very discombobulated. There are like small players just because the Tremor problem in itself is very complex. There's such a high variability from one individual to another that's very difficult to find a solution that works across the board. So it's essentially a market waiting to be disrupted.
What's the like spatial resolution you guys can kind of reduce the cover count?
Spatial resolution.
Or maybe like
yeah, so that's
varies.
That come out in the trial. We can't really give any numbers like that right now. All I can say is that during our beta testing, we've seen some improvements in patients' writing, eating, drinking. So we can't really say what.
Our device was designed to stabilize and dampen tremors. We can't, if we disclose a figure right now, we'll be held by it, and that's not really the best case scenario for us.
Talk a little bit about your experience the device you might have in terms of manufacturing, maybe small scale manufacturing runs.
I'll hand the floor to Mark over there.
Okay. Are you talking prototyping stage, or are you talking sort of
more
small
this
scale?
Yeah, like that. Yeah, like what we're seeing.
Small scale. So at the prototyping stage, I'll just run through my experience so you can maybe gain from the versions. So at the prototyping stage, was very difficult for us, especially in Canada. A lot of our parts are CNC machined, aluminum, steel combination thereof. So finding a manufacturer that produces full scale in a rapid prototyping manner is not easy. So if you stay here while doing this, you're going to have a prototyping iteration time of 2 months minimum, right? Because if you're doing small scale, you're going to be thrown down the priority list, and it's going to take time for you to pump your units up. So I suggest going to the States for that prototyping, at least at the start. And for us, when you're doing, once you freeze the design after several prototyping iterations, you want to start considering manufacturing. So China's the obvious choice. Everything is much cheaper there, it's faster, but there's always a communication problem. So I suggest going with a Canadian company that has operations in China that does. So it takes a lot of headaches away from them. I mean, they're dealing with all the communication problems, all these things. It's for a small premium, but in my opinion, it's worth it. So you go through a few sample runs, iterate, you fix it, and you go.
Like, it's not just the language barrier that's the issue. It's also the fact that there's a severe difference in the time zones. So in order to actually speak to a manufacturer and ask for simple samples, it would require you to be working out of your office at around 9 p.m. or 10 p.m.
Yeah, I work those night shifts all the time because we do have a manufacturing time. But at the same time, the most important key thing when it comes to manufacturing is clear communication. You have to be extremely crystal clear on every single requirement, because anything you miss, any detail you miss, they're gonna push the limits in regards to how loosely they're inviting to requirements. We have to be very strict.
One thing that really speeded up our product development at a later stage was once we had identified our design goals and decided that we're sticking with this and we're not changing this anymore. So one thing you'll realize if you go down the path of product development is that there's a certain cycle you want to follow, and then after that you want to kind of optimize. Optimizing can actually take longer than the design itself. Optimizing is something that you kind of want to identify as, all right, this is diminishing returns. I'm no longer going to work on this. That's when you have to know when to pull the plug. That really requires someone with a very robust idea of what they want to sell to the market, because you'll see this not just with medical technology. You'll see this with any startup in the world. Where do you draw the line? When do you pull the plug and say, all right, this is no longer rewarding, or all right, this is what I want to take to the market? You have to be able to identify that and have either a great team of mentors or very, very good drive and persistence on when to identify that.
Otherwise, like you said, those are called perpetual R&D.
You'll fall down the rabbit hole.
So what do you see the company in another 2 or 3 years' time?
That's a good question. So I'd say in 2 to 3 years, we'll have consolidated the healthcare side of the market in North America, and we will be scaling for other markets such as the Eastern market and European markets, and of course the Middle Eastern market or MENA region. We'd also like to have raised a round by then of investment, which will allow us to explore different applications for different markets, such as markets that we realize also have gaps. I prefer not to discuss them on camera, but we can discuss them later on.
Our strategy is very much beachhead. We focus on the release our technology, and then focusing our energies in different continents while keeping R&D cycles going to develop more advanced versions of the glove that are more aesthetically pleasant. I think that's where we see the company.
Are you doing clinical trial now, or is it?
We are not performing clinical trial at this stage. We will be commencing with the pilot in 2 locations, one in Toronto, one in the Bay Area in California. Those will start in July.
By pilot, what is that?
So, senior living facility, it's a qualitative study. We will be running a more robust trial within the next year.
What's the assessment of it?
That makes it qualitative.
Yeah.
We'll be following standardized.
In a qualitative framework, we're just using tremor rating scales. So we're not using any sensors or any objective identifiers. So
take the time it takes to do something.
Sure. I mean, we can look at that, but that's also somewhat qualitative because there are a lot of factors that go into this. At the end of the day, a clinical trial will be a mix of qualitative and quantitative data, where we'll be measuring, with sensors, percentage reduction of tremors. Right now, for the pilot study, we're just seeing if this is a device that will help in the senior living facility framework.
And essential tremors are quite a bit different than Parkinsonian tremors. So, in essential tremor, people generally are otherwise well. Parkinsonian ones have many other aspects of the illness besides the tremor.
Correct.
So capacity of movement.
Bradykinesia.
Right. So is it? How do those 2 markets compare, and which one do you think is better? I think probably a little bit seems better suited to the essential one because it's just
it's just the tremor. So I feel that both essential tremor and Parkinson's have somewhat different requirements because the way to generalize this is that tremor is a combination of a functional problem and a social problem. So in Parkinson's disease and essential tremor, it's not just the tremor that's bothersome. It's the social embarrassment that goes with it. So it's all about balancing both. Since tremor is prevalent in essential tremor and Parkinson's, we were able to generalize requirements for it.
Is the essential larger market?
Yeah.
Yes, the essential tremor market is up to 10 times the size of the Parkinsonian market. And if you look up a couple of studies that were done, for example, there's a study that comes out of Columbia University that you'll notice that essential tremor patients or sufferers, they retire much earlier than they need to. Up to 25 or 30% of them are unemployed because they're, one, socially not comfortable with their tremors. Two, sometimes their upper management identifies them as lazy or incompetent. There's a very good example of that here in Canada with the founder of Essential Tremor Canada, who was actually laid off for being labeled as lazy when she actually had essential tremor. I'm sure you can find more information about that online, but she was a great inspiration to our project earlier on, and we still stay in touch with her to kind of develop our relationship and understand more about what else patients suffer from.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Thank you all for taking the time to join us today.